It's not, there it is. Kim, would you like to start?
Kim Ridgway, AC Transit.
Sharon from Contra Costa Dial-A-Ride. Thank you.
Aldello Smith, Antioch, East County, Paratransit.
Deanna Perry, Tri-Delta Transit.
It went out of my head what I was
Janet Abelson, West County Consumer.
Rita Xavier, Advisory Council on Aging from the county.
Belinda Graham, City of San Pablo.
Debbie Toth, Choice in Aging.
Janet Bilbis, City of El Cerrito.
Okay.
Peter Engel, Contra Costa Transportation Authority, and I'll introduce quickly a new staff member who will be taking over the PCC for Irene. This is Firdos Jahal. Sorry, I've been taking cold medicine for 3 weeks, and I'm
Could you spell that first name, please?
F-I-F-I.
Okay.
She goes by Fifi. So yeah,
Okay.
it's F-I-R-D-A-U-S, but you're okay to go by Fifi. Okay. And just for a little bit more information, our senior accountant Larry Bieber retired, and so Irene was promoted into that position, and then so we hired Fifi to take over for. Were you congratulating Fifi or Irene?
No, Irene.
Oh.
Okay.
She has no idea what she's stepping into.
Yeah, well, actually, Fifi worked in the recreation department for the city of San Leandro. I was going to say, I'm glad you said that. I was going to say Castro Valley, San Leandro, and worked a little bit with their paratransit operation there. So she's aware of paratransit. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go to the audience. Ralph, would you like to start?
Ralph Hoffman. I'm a member of the Senior Mobility Action Council. I'm a member of the male gender. I hope you want to hold that against me.
We welcome you. Let's see, I can't tell the order, so whoever, John, are you next? Sure. Okay. And then, well, thank you all for coming. I know it still feels like the year is just beginning, and somehow it's always a little bit harder to get out. So thank you all for being here. The next item on the agenda is public comment on items that are not on the agenda. If members of the public want to speak on items that are on the agenda, they can do so as we do those items, but they can also speak now. Ralph, would you like to be first?
Ralph Hoffman. I just introduced myself. I am a paratransit rider from Central County, and I would like to reapply for the Paratransit Coordinating Council. I believe you have my application on file. See, there still are some vacancies in Central County, and I would be glad to discuss why Measure X failed. It had really nothing to do with CCTA. It had more to do with the low turnout of the presidential election. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on items not on the agenda? Okay, not seeing any, we'll move on to item number 4, which is summary of actions from September 19th, 2016 PCC meeting, which is attached. And that is on page
7.
7? Okay. Okay, are there any comments? So, what do we do with, this wasn't a quorum, right?
Yeah, it was a quorum.
It was a quorum. Okay. Why doesn't it say minutes then?
We don't do minutes anymore for PCC or any of our committees. We do summary of actions.
Okay. Okay. So do we need to approve them, or what do we do then? Okay, so there's a motion? Somebody, did
I
you?
move that we approve the
Okay, is there a
course of action, what was it? Summary.
summary of actions? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion from Rita, seconded by Kim. Is there any discussion? Any comments from the public? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? I abstain because I was not here. Anyone else need to abstain? Okay. Then it passed. The next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 17-18 Measure J, Program 15, claim schedule and subcommittee appointment. Peter?
Yeah, so we do this every month or every year this month, and this is kind of setting up our claim process for Measure J, Program 15 funds. So you'll see here the proposed schedule for that. Starting in the end of March, we will get the estimated revenue for the program for 17-18. And go through the process of having the operators complete the claim forms, have a PCC review, subcommittee review the claim forms, and bring the action back to the PCC on May 15th, and then move it forward for board authority on June 21st, prior to the beginning of the fiscal year in July. So action by you would approve the schedule, and then Janet, you would look to set up the subcommittee that would review the claims.
Okay.
And we will do that review between April 26th and May 2nd. So we'll need 1 day in that time period.
April
26th
26th.
through May 2nd.
Okay, 1 day.
So, yeah, just 1 day.
One entire day, more or less.
Yeah, for the most part, it's one entire day. We'll serve lunch. And then, again, I think this is an opportunity for new members on the PCC to learn a lot about the agencies that receive the Measure J funds and kind of how the system works. So I would encourage any new members, if you have the time and are available for a day during that period to let Janet know that you're interested.
So we can do that now? Okay. So who's interested, this is for PCC members, who's interested in being, just raise your hand if you're interested. I'm interested. So it's Kim, Elfellow, okay, Deanna, Janet, Rita. What? For Vicky. Okay, so Vicky. And was there anyone else? Do we have a committee of the whole in that number? I didn't count. How many names did you write down? 6? Okay, that's not a committee of the whole. Okay. Yes?
I'm not volunteering. I just want to be clear. I think Josh might want to be a part of it, and he's not here. Is it possible to reach out to him after this meeting to see if it's something he's interested in, or do we need to have him here at this moment?
So
for
I'm
that?
a little confused. I thought you raised your hand.
Yeah, I raised my hand to make the point that Josh is not here. And I
Okay,
think
so
he
you're raising
expressed
your hand on
interest.
his behalf? We'll just call it Josh wants to volunteer, and if he doesn't later, that would be okay. Yeah.
Okay,
How's that? Does that work?
that's fine.
Okay. He can always not come. Right. But you yourself don't want to. Okay. Okay, so we're all set on that. Is there anything else we need to do on that item?
Nope.
Okay, great.
Take action.
Pardon?
You need to take action and approve the schedule.
You mean the actual dates?
Yes.
Okay, so
Madam Chair,
you
I
know,
move,
we don't have Josh here, so how are we gonna?
No, the date, this calendar for the
What page are you on? Oh, so it's just the rank, I mean, it's not, okay. Can everybody tell what we're doing? Okay, great. So is there a motion to do that?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll move that we accept the schedule as printed.
Okay.
I second it.
Okay, so there's a motion by Othello, and there's a second from Janet Bilbus. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstention? Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
Madam Chair, I'll have Fifi get a hold of everybody that volunteered to be on the subcommittee, and we'll figure out which day works for everybody.
Okay, great. So now then, we're ready to go on to item number 6, which is an update on the Caltrans Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Program, which is called the FTA 5310 2017 cycle.
Yeah, that's correct. So there was a workshop on this last Tuesday, I believe, maybe in the week before that, in Oakland at the Caltrans division office. And the 5310 program is a program that is administered by Caltrans. It's federal funds from the Federal Transit Administration, and it is for enhanced mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. Historically, it has been a capital program that nonprofit agencies have used to purchase vehicles. More recently, it has also included mobility management activities and some operational activities that occurred during the last federal legislation when they combined some programs, and a program was combined into the 5310 program that did allow for some operational uses of mobility management. So those are both on the table. I don't want to go through this whole thing. I tried to include a lot of information in here. So if you have any questions, it's probably either answered in here, or there's web pages in here for Caltrans or MTC that you can go to. MTC still does play a role in this. The MTC contact is Drennan Shelton. She's been here before. If you don't know how to get a hold of Drennan, let me or Fifi know, and we will gladly put you in touch with her. We don't exactly know. In the past, as Janet knows, the PCC has played a large role in the 5310 program in the scoring or pre-scoring, I guess, of applications. We haven't done that since the program changed a few years ago, and we're not exactly sure what our role will be yet, if anything, in this scoring round, other than really getting the word out and letting nonprofits and public agencies know that these funds are available for enhanced mobility for seniors and people with disabilities. Generally, this is mobility management, and it's services that go above and beyond the ADA. So, and then services that provide ADA services, you can use that for vehicle purchases. So there's very strict guidelines on what vehicles can be purchased or replaced. Those go through Caltrans. I think one of the there's two main differences in this year's program. The grant, or the required local match will be covered by what they call toll credits. So that means that essentially there is no local match. You can apply for and receive 100% of your project cost. The second thing is, and probably the most difficult for people, will be that the applications must be applied for electronically. Caltrans has a what they're calling a EGM, electronic grants management software. If you're interested in applying and you haven't gone to one of the workshops, we'll have you let us know, and we'll have you get in touch with Caltrans, and they will give you access to the system so that you can provide your grant online. And and then you would need to do that as soon as possible because Drennan and MTC will be reviewing all the grants for the Bay Area properties, and then those grants will be submitted to Caltrans for scoring.
I'm not sure I understood that. If I might be the one to say that.
Please don't ask me to repeat it again.
No, the part I think I didn't
I
understand
may not have
is,
said it clear because my, head's
no,
not
I
wiring
think you
it.
did it fine. I just don't understand. So the change this year is because there's some money available in the toll.
Yeah, they call them toll credits, but it has nothing to do with the tolls.
Okay.
It's a state thing. Officially, they're called. Do you remember what they're called officially? Okay. Officially, they're called something else, but they call them toll credits. They really have nothing to do with the toll bridges, but it's somehow money that the state has that they can use to backfill against local match, and so there's enough available that they can cover all the local match.
So is that just this year or future years or?
All we know is that for this cycle.
Okay.
Which is it's a 3-year cycle, so and
Okay.
it's good for this whole cycle.
Okay.
Yeah, Peter,
Transportation Development Credits
Peter,
is the official name.
before we leave that, 2 or 3 days ago when I was reading through there, I noticed the breakdown of funds that's available in this cycle, and I believe it was 55 and 45. And my question is on the 45, and I guess I need an explanation, a further explanation of how this committee is going to impact this round of funding, because if I heard you correctly, we don't know whether we're going to be involved or not. And if we're not going to be involved, I ask why not?
So the 55% is for what they're calling the traditional application or traditional projects. So that would be for capital projects. So basically for 99% of the agencies in the state use it for rolling stock for vehicles. And then generally along with that, they'll get radios that they need within those vehicles. Sometimes they use it for computer purchases, stuff like that. So 55% of the funds at a minimum go towards that. 45% then can be used for operating programs or mobility management. So that's the 55-45 split. Again, Caltrans has always run this program, and historically has looked to the PCC to do a preliminary score. What we did was never official anyway. So how it used to work was, and Janet can give you a lot of details on this because she was on this committee, I think, every year to do this. These applications are about that thick, and there's a scoring sheet and clear directions on how you're supposed to score these things. And so we would go through and score them, and then we'd all get together as a subcommittee and we would review each other's scores and kind of, work out a final score, and then we would submit that to MTC. And then MTC would score them and see if they drew the same conclusions we did. And in most cases they did. If they didn't, they'd ask questions, and we'd try and work. And then it was officially submitted to Caltrans, and Caltrans would again score them and come up with a final roster of programs that they would send to the California Transportation Commission, and they would take official action on approving this program of projects based on these. So in trying to streamline the process from 3 different groups, scoring the same application, they've made it kind of more of a, they've tried to take some of the, I don't know. To be honest with you, I guess, I don't know why they've taken it out of our hands. It potentially could still be in our hands. We could, with the approval of Caltrans, I mean, it's their program, do a round of scoring. it's going to be a little difficult now because it's not done on paper. It's all done as part of the this electronic grant management system. So we would have to get access and we would have to review it. So what will happen is people will submit their applications to MTC, to Drennan, and if Drennan has any questions or issues, she'll contact me. And if we want to put a subcommittee together, just in case there's questions that come up, and we can, if I get questions, we can shoot it out to the subcommittee. We can do that. I'll leave that up to the chair to, decide if you think that's something important. Sometimes these things need real quick turnaround. So, we could do it that way, but they've just kind of taken that scoring part out of our hands. Not because we weren't doing a good job or anything. It's just,
But what we were doing is, I think that we saw, kind of before we were doing it that way, what we saw is that our applicants from our county weren't getting what we would consider our share of the money. And we didn't like that. And so we tried to think of ways that we could help the process to entitle our applicants from our county to get as much of their fair share of the money as possible within, and do everything in an honest and open way. But what we did was that we reviewed their applications and gave them, this would be ahead of time, and gave them comments on it. So sometimes they, it would say list 4 things, and they would, somehow they just didn't see that, and they would list no things or something, like on the first aid, show where you did first aid training was a good example, where the instructions said to, you get 2 points, as I remember, for doing first aid training. Well, if you don't, you may do first aid training, but if you don't say somewhere that you do first aid training and what that amounts to, you don't get the points. And so what we would do is look at their applications and make sure they're completely filled out. That's really kind of what we did. And that way, they got all the points they were entitled to. That was really, to me, the value that we added, and we could, I think, from what you're saying, still do that. It doesn't matter whether the points are turned in. We could just look at the applications and say, are they missing anything? That's kind of what they would always be doing, pretty much, is they would be missing certain sections. And because we had spent more time with the subject matter, we knew how to pick up that they had missed the stuff.
Or knew that they had done stuff that they
Yeah.
weren't saying.
And so we would help them with that. And sometimes what we would do is save them a lot of time.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, point of information. You keep referring to they. Can you
The
explain
applicants.
who they are?
Well, it could be, usually it's a nonprofit. Is that what you mean by that, your question?
No. When you were
The other day?
when you were going over the review process, you referred to they 3 or 4 times.
I think
Is that
maybe
the MTC? Is it Caltrans? Whom is it?
it's sort of both. It's I would say it's both. Because that was where it went when it went in its more official capacity. So we were doing a pre-screening, as Peter said.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing a pre-screening, and then we would sit down with them and make comments on it. So because it was a pre-screening and unofficial, they were still able to correct their application. By correct their application, I mean in the case of the first aid training, they could add the first aid training that they do to the application. And that way they got 2 more points in that example, as I remember. Right? Remember how the numbering system, right? And it was amazing how many things that people did, how many applications people did where they didn't actually put everything on it that they actually do. And what that meant was the difference in their score. And their score, maybe you needed a score of 80, let's say I'm making this number up, to actually get a vehicle, but they were only getting 60 because they were leaving all these things out. And so because we would help them with their application, maybe they got their score up to 80. Or maybe we could tell, looking at their application, that there was no way they were going to get their score high enough to get a vehicle. And then we could save them all the time it takes to prepare the application. And we could tell them, in the future how to do the things that needed to be done. And usually that had something to do with the number of miles and the age of the vehicle. That was usually the most important thing in terms of number of points, as I remember. So we could still do that if we wanted to. We wouldn't have to even do the point thing. We could just, they could just sort of, and we could develop maybe a little different training or the same training, and we could just see if they have all the things on there. It's almost like a quality control, I think, don't you, Peter?
Yeah, I would suggest at this point, let me get a hold of Drennan at MTC and talk to her about that, there's still interest in us having a role in at least doing a pre-screen or making sure that, the Contra Costa applications are, as good as they can be. I don't know about the access to the computer part, so I'll have to find out about that. So
I'm thinking we don't even need it, do we?
Well, everything's going to be done online. So
I understand that, but maybe I don't.
I'd at least have to look and see if they're asking the same stuff as they historically have, and how they're expected to enter it into the computer.
Yeah, that would be fine. I just think that we want to ensure that, because what was happening, what I remember originally was happening is that Marin County was getting a huge amount of money. Like all of their applications were getting money, getting vehicles, and we weren't getting any initially. That's what led us to do this.
Yeah.
Doesn't that make you want to do something?
Okay, let me look into that and see if there's something that we can still
Debbie?
do.
I would also just say that it may not be an issue of us being able to access their grant management systems, but asking the people like me who are submitting those grant applications online. Everything I submit online as a grant, I make a copy of in our own files. And so it may be just that we print out a copy and bring to you or file it to you as an electronic file, send it to you so that it can be reviewed that way as opposed to you having to go into their grants management system, because I think that's not going to happen. I will say that as a first-time applicant, however many years ago it was, 10 years ago, it was super helpful to have somebody who knew what they were doing look at my application and help make it better. So it is a service that we want to ensure that we collect as much money as we can in our community to serve the needs.
So you're just going to ask and see what's possible. Mm-hmm.
At least, at the very least, it won't be a problem to find out who's applying, who's submitting applications.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Who's submitting the applications? Which agencies within Contra Costa are submitting?
Oh,
Madam Chair.
Yes.
One last thing on this. We meet every 2 months, and according to the schedule, there's not much time for us to get information and get the feedback, and for us to, and if we were allowed to have impact in that decision, there doesn't seem to be much time for us to do that according to this schedule.
well,
And I'm concerned that they'll tell us we can do something, and we don't have the time to do it.
well, if we were interested in following up on this, and we can't know until Peter checks what's actually possible, but we could say today, for example, who might be interested in being on that committee if it exists, and then we don't have to wait 2 months to figure out who even wants to do it. Pardon?
I would definitely want to be on that.
Okay. So shall we do that? And, okay, so raise your hand if you would, please, if you would be willing to be on that committee. We need at least, I think, one more person or...
Vicky would be interested.
Pardon?
Vicky.
Vicky, okay. So three's enough. If anyone else wants to be interested, they could contact Peter, right? Okay. And so there will be a training. If this goes forward, there would be a training so that we're up to speed on the current version of the system. Okay. And I, as Debbie said, I think, I don't know about the rest of you, but I would hope that you have a Contra Costa interest in mind. I like to think we all do, and I think we all do probably, because some agencies, that's the only way they get this. There's not another way to do it. So, and even then it's really hard. So, okay, is there anything else to talk about on this? Does anyone have any further questions, or does anyone in the audience have a question? Anything? Okay. Yes?
Is anyone allowed to volunteer to sit on these committees, or just the board members?
I think it's just the board members, right?
It's up to you.
Mhm.
I mean, for the most part, it's just the members on PCC, yeah.
Yeah. It has been. I think it.
It might be difficult to organize people from the outside.
There's a lot of logistical stuff involved. That's.
So do you mean to review or you mean to be reviewed? I just wanted to clarify your question.
Actually, I like to participate in the whole process.
So submitting an application and
No,
having
not
Oh,
submitting.
that's what I was asking. Okay.
Not submitting an application. And let me, now, I guess maybe I have another question for follow-up. When you say now, what nonprofits are allowed to submit applications?
That's a Peter question.
Any nonprofit that is providing mobility services to seniors or people with disabilities.
In Contra Costa County, in our case?
Well, in the state, in our case, in Contra Costa County, yeah. So in the item, did you get a copy of the?
No,
Okay.
I didn't get anything. I got a call from, I'm sorry, sir. Yes. Remind me, you guys forgot me on this month.
If you go to the Caltrans webpage, you know what? Let us get your contact information, and we'll get you a link to the information on the application and who all is eligible. And I mean, IRL would be an eligible applicant, I believe.
Are we ready to move on, or is there anything further? I think we're ready to move on. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Fair Political Practices Commission Form 700, Electronic Filing and Conflict of Interest Training, and I bet I know who's doing it.
You're not feeling well, it's fine. Hi, so I'm here to talk about your most favorite disclosure filings of the year, the Form 700. You're all familiar with the Form 700. You file them when you assume office or are appointed to a committee or board. You file them annually. That's coming up again on April 1st. And then you also have to file one when you leave office or your term expires. And And that's all mandated by the Political Reform Act and the Fair Political Practices Commission. The authority adopted our Conflict of Interest Code, which included all the committees to file in 2014. What's going to be different this year is that we are going to get NetFile sometime in the next 2 weeks, which allows electronic filing of the Form 700s. So you'll see an email blast going out probably sometime in the next 2 weeks, and we're going to have 2 trainings. There will be a training during the day and then one in the evening, and maybe we can arrange something. Actually, you don't meet again until March, so that probably won't work. So we'll definitely offer a day training and an evening training. And we'll go over exactly how that filing works. Essentially, you're going to get an email link, you'll set up a password, and then you'll fill out your Form 700 electronically. And then moving forward, when you leave office or you're going to file your annual statement, it's going to be a lot easier. It'll just be that first time of getting all that information in. So instead of filling out that form, you'll do it electronically. And the county actually switched over to using NetFile last year. I don't know if any of you file with the county for any other committees, but they are also doing NetFiles. So that will allow you to just add us on there, and you can file it all with one filing. You can print it out and sign it and mail it to the people that don't do it electronically. So it'll be a lot easier. It'll make everything, we're going with NetFile, which is the same agency as the county, so that it will be seamless for anyone who files with the county. And then there will be no paper filing. So you'll just do it all electronically. When you go in to do your leaving or your annual, everything will already be in there. You'll just update it for the last 12 months. So does anyone have any questions?
Rita?
Yes, I have already done this online for the San Pablo Planning Commission, but I couldn't figure out how to do it for the other things, like this and the Advisory Council on Aging. I didn't see where I go to put in. Like for the Planning Commission, my contact information is our deputy city clerk, which shows up in there. But I was trying to do it for the rest, and I haven't quite figured that out.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into play with it too much, so hopefully you can ask those questions during the training. But you'll do an expanded statement, and you're going to add the additional agencies. But every agency does have a different filing officer.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure exactly when you get in there how that's going to work, but it's definitely a possibility that you can do all of it at once. The reason that you might have had an issue doing CCTA is because we weren't a part of it yet.
Oh, okay.
So, and I assume it was NetFile. There's also South Tech. So I don't know if those.
When I did it for the planning, I got a notice from whoever put out the website to do it. So when I went in for the Planning Commission, the information was already there of the contact person.
Yeah. So when you do the extended, I'm assuming, I don't know if you have to manually put my contact in there or if it'll automatically be in there.
That's what I was wondering.
But we can definitely address those questions during training. But I do know there's an option to do the expanded, so it may just be that you had to, there's probably just one more step to do for multiple at once.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, but I'll definitely have that addressed during the training.
Anyone else have a question? I do. So what if you have a multi-county position in addition to ones that are within a county?
It'd probably be the same as Rita was just asking. It's going to be a multi, but it's probably going to depend on if those agencies are using NetFile or not, or if they're using either just still paper filing or South Tech. So I think they're all going to have to be a vendor, that uses electronic filing. Otherwise, what you can do is fill it out. And when you do that expanded statement, you can put in the other committees, and then you'd print it out, and you'd have to sign it and still mail in that paper copy to the agency.
So
but for us, you wouldn't have to do anything further.
So say you do, I don't know, I'll make up the number 6. Let's say you file for 6 agencies, and they're a combination of all the different or some of the different possibilities. And for the ones that are electronic filing, you can do this way. Mm-hmm. And then the ones that aren't, you do the other way?
Yeah, you can just use that same information that you inputted, but just print it out and then just sign it and then mail it into those agencies.
Okay. And you don't for the electronic ones, you don't turn it into the agencies at all?
No.
And then for the ones who don't have it, the system, the ones who don't have the systems, you have to file it, and each agency will tell you if is on the system?
They should, yeah. They should be contacting you. There's an email blast that's going to go out. So they're going to let you know. You're going to get identified from your filing officer from each agency that's switching over. But the ones that are electronic, you don't have to submit a hard copy anymore with an original wet signature. It's just all submitted electronically, where the agencies that are still doing the paper, you do have to submit a hard copy with an original signature.
Okay. Any other questions? Has this committee filed this form before?
Yeah. Yes.
We have? Okay, I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
And is it
So
filed
it's
by... Well, my question was actually
to 10.
It depends if you're just on Social Security or not.
Depends on your investments and rentals, homes, anything that can become a conflict.
Spouses, it depends on your spouses.
It also depends on your categories. The categories for the disclosures for the PCC aren't as high as some of the, like if you're actually on the authority board or a city council. So it depends. So you have to file less for this committee than, say, like if you're on a city council.
You just have to file once
Everybody just does the same one for every agency.
Just one,
easier.
One per agency?
Yeah.
You don't have to...
I mean, you can disclose less, but most people will just fill one out and submit it to all the different agencies, so they don't fill out 20 different forms.
But I mean, say that you have to do it, you're on 2 committees at an agency, you don't have to file one, you just file once per agency.
If you're on 2 committees at an agency, you have to list both. Yeah. So you would list, like, well, for you would be authority board, commissioner, and then the Paratransit Coordinating Council committee member. So you would list both, but you could do it, and you have to file 2 right now because I'm the filing officer for the PCC, and the county's the filing officer for the authority board.
I don't think I ever knew about the county.
Yeah. Well, you send me the original, and then I file it with the county.
Oh, okay.
I drive it over there.
I just didn't know that. Thank you.
So you have 2 filing officers for our agency.
Okay. That's confusing, but oh well. That's why this will be nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I'm probably the one with the most problems because it's all about my husband. He has if you have a spouse who has a business, you have to put all of that stuff in there.
Yes.
And getting the information isn't always easy. Okay, so we're finished then for that?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so we'll just wait for there to be an announcement about this training. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the Service Review Advisory Committee report. So there was no meeting this month. So that was easy. The next item on the agenda is the Senior Mobility Action Council report. Is that, who does that?
There was a meeting this morning, which I was not at. Debbie was there. Can she report in my place?
Caught.
Yeah, we met this morning. There was a phenomenal presentation on Senior Centers Without Walls, and we had invited them to come because we wanted to use Senior Centers Without Walls as a platform for gathering information about accessibility, about knowledge of services, about what people's needs are. And there was some discussion back and forth about the fact that Seniors Without Walls is now countrywide, and transportation, as we all know, is very local, and where that split comes and how we want to get information. And so we had a bit of a brainstorming session refining a list of questions that we wanted to ask. We landed on it will probably be 1 or 2 calls that we would use to gather information, but also to give some general contact information and basic rights information related to the ADA with Paratransit, and that we may want to do a more locally focused collection of information so that we get at riders that we don't typically get information from. But we learned a lot about senior centers with that one. It was really very informative, great presentation. We ended the meeting discussing how we're going to focus our annual event this year. We're going to plan on doing an annual event. We've done one in the past on isolation, and then we did another one on sort of the brain and aging. And at each of these, we provide, obviously, information on what services are available for transportation. And this year, so we talked about exploring mobility management, exploring what to do in the absence of funding, and how we create more person-centered mobility options. So we didn't land on exactly what our theme was going to be, but we discussed these different ideas. At our next meeting next month, we are going to do a deep dive into what we want to do for our next steps, given that Measure X didn't pass. And so the funding that we had believed would be available to allow us to have a much more person-centered system of transit for people with disabilities in the aging population, just because the measure didn't pass doesn't mean the need doesn't exist. And so how are we going to mobilize to educate and advocate to ensure that those needs are met in the absence of Measure X? So our next session is really going to be on brainstorming and creating our advocacy platform for that.
Questions? I guess everything you said was very clear. Thank you. Okay. Then the next item on the agenda, we're really going through this list fast today, is future agenda items. So what do we know already, Peter?
I know that at the last meeting we discussed, and I think, Kim, was it Tom and you and me were going to do like a funding?
Yeah, at our last meeting, we were talking about having that as part of the agenda item, but we didn't discuss exactly what.
Yeah, so with the new folks on the PCC, I think we had thought that a better understanding of how paratransit service is funded, and that I think I got Tom Horaeus at Tri-Delta to commit to help with me on that, and I think
To do a presentation, though.
to do a presentation.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think we wrangled Kim into kind of helping with that too, if I remember correctly. So because she's kind of from a larger agency that represents two fixed route operators versus the other suburban operators that all run their own services. So just kind of give everybody an idea of where the funding comes from, state, federal, how vehicles are funded, how operations is funded, things like that. So that's one thing that's on the list.
Okay, and other things you already have on the list?
I'm trying to think for March, what else we have on here. I know in May we'll be doing the Measure J allocations. I can't think off the top of my head what else I have.
I was
down for
wondering
March.
about the items that are on this time that you would either give us a status report of what's going on or if something is going on, and that would be the the claims. There ought to be just a status of what the dates are, or things like that. And then the Caltrans program, the 5310, the status on that, probably.
Okay. Yeah.
One way, so we know one way or the other what's happening.
Okay.
And the I don't know if there's anything for the Form 700 that would require being on the agenda separately. Is there, I don't know. If there- March.
Will the training be by then? Will the training be over by then? Yeah. Okay.
Maybe just a reminder.
Just a reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Call out individually the people who haven't yet done it.
Yes, Seamus. I'm sure I'll be on that list because my husband never gets his stuff to me in time. Just the sort of standard boilerplate. And then Debbie, do you have something?
Do. In addition to the fixed route providers providing information about funding and program structure, I think it would be important for the new members of the PCC to also understand what other services, volunteer driver programs, van programs, things like that, that we also have in our community in terms of service that supports paratransit or serves people who either are on the cusp of qualifying or not, who can't get their needs met through paratransit. And I think that we, at some point in time, looked at the way that the language was written regarding this committee to ensure that we addressed accessible transportation, not just the fixed paratransit service, correct?
We have in the past had the operators that receive Measure J funding come and give a presentation on their program. And I think we talked about having other agencies do that as well. And I think that's kind of what Debbie's talking about, is the other agencies that are out there providing services, and have them come and give presentations on what they're doing and where they're receiving their funding and who they're serving and what kind of trips they're providing. So are you volunteering for what? Choices in aging? Choice in aging.
I can't see what it says.
Sorry. The brain synapses aren't.
Our new name is Choice in Aging.
Choice in Aging.
So I don't know that I was necessarily asking that we each get up and give a presentation, but certainly an overview of the different kinds of transportation that are providing what services in what parts of the county. I'm happy to gather that information. But I don't think like presentations on each one of them, but I think sort of a summary so that people, way to go, Contra Costa has a pretty good, wealth of that anyway.
Okay. Does somebody else?
Yeah,
Yes.
I have. I'd also like to hear at some point, and maybe this presentation you're going to make is the point, where you would do this, I'd like to hear a clear mission statement for this committee. As a new member of the committee, I'm not sure what the responsibility of this committee is and how we are supposed to reasonably interact with all of these other entities that's sitting around the table. And so I think a clear mission statement would help me to understand that relationship.
Bylaws, right?
Bylaws, and there's purpose in the bylaws, so maybe we can go through those. And we had talked about we do need to make some revisions to the bylaws, and maybe this is a good time to bring that up and do that again.
And our way of interacting with each other is at these meetings, and they are covered by the Brown Act, right? So we have to do so under the guise of the Brown Act. Have you been trained on the Brown Act?
Not trained on it. I have an idea, but
So what do we do when people are new and need to have that training? Do we do it somehow?
Is that part of conflict of interest training?
No, they're just separate.
You want to just do it in March?
Okay. It's never bad for people to get a refresher training.
Yeah, we'll do a Brown Act training in March.
And any other things like that? That you're wondering about, or?
no, that would make it.
We can always start there because we can't do everything all at once anyway. And if you think of something more at another meeting, we'll talk about it then. Okay. We're counting on you. Okay, so we've, I think, identified planning for our meeting for next time. So now I think we're ready to move on to any news to share. Janet?
We have Lyft coming to present at El Cerrito Senior Center on April 5th at 1:15. So we're very excited, and the presentation is, if you haven't had contact with Lyft, they're now looking at what they consider senior concierge service. And so you do not have to have a smartphone to actually contact them. They do not say they do door-to-door service, but they do curb-to-curb service. So we will be having them give us a talk on how all the seniors can sign up and use Lyft.
Question. Lyft is the other agency besides Uber-like.
Yeah.
Do they offer wheelchair service? Because I heard you say senior. I didn't.
The best thing is come April 5th to the presentation and find out from them.
Okay, April 5th. At what time?
1:15, 6500 Stockton Avenue. You must RSVP. Limited space.
Well, I don't take a chair. On my own.
Yeah.
Let's see here. See if I can go.
Can you add that to the
What?
agenda
It's
for a report
April.
out?
Let's find out if I can go.
We're actually saying, this is the first time Lyft has ever done a presentation to a kind
So
of
I
a
can
consumer
actually
group.
go.
Usually they work much more with larger organizations, so we're very excited to have them come present to us.
At 1:15?
Yes.
Okay, I can actually go, and it'll probably shock them when they see somebody in a wheelchair. Okay, I will go because I've actually met with Uber, and they said, no, they're not interested, in case anybody wants to boycott them.
Lyft was actually our Committee on Aging who arranged this presentation. They talked to both Uber and Lyft, and Uber really was non-responsive. They weren't interested, but Lyft is extremely interested in this, and they're working with a lot of hospitals and health organizations to add this into their service area.
I did hear an interesting fact from somebody in the last couple of days about the shuttle from the Coliseum BART station that goes to the Oakland Airport. And I'm forgetting what that service is called. The Oakland Airport Connector, I think is what they call it, unless they've changed the name. And apparently it's not doing as well as it was. And what they said is that people are taking Uber and Lyft instead of taking the connector that was put in at such a huge expense.
Well, that short connection is very expensive.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, it's interesting that these services are really taking off. I do know that, even if I can't ride.
I wanted to mention to Janet, Lyft was on press here on Sunday morning explaining that very program that you're talking about. So they seem to be very interested. They're going out to getting a lot of press on it. They're advertising it, and they're not afraid to talk about it.
It's kind of foolish for Uber not to understand that probably the largest growing population is the aging population. And if you get them early on, you could have them for a good 30, 40 years of using your service. So it's great that Lyft is doing that, because a lot of people need a ride in a very short window of time. It could be a short window. It could be, a medical emergency. So I'm also very happy to hear that you can connect with them without having to have a smartphone. So.
Is that something that's required with Uber?
Yes.
I have no need, of course, since they won't take me anyway. Anyway, any other news to share? That was pretty interesting. Anything else? Debbie?
Did you want me to introduce our name? I'm the CEO of the CIA now. We officially changed our organization name from Rehabilitation Services of Northern California to Choice in Aging on January 12th. We have our name filed on hold, and a charter amendment is in process at the state, so you'll get updated information from me once we have all the numbers from the state. Did you want me to update on something else or just that?
If you have something.
Crab feed, February 25th.
We already had ours.
Good? Good crab?
And anybody else have anything to report they want to mention? Okay. And with that, then we will adjourn. And our next meeting is on what date? Oh, it's right here. Sorry. And thank you all for coming.